Hello, everybody. I see participants rolling in here. Just wanted to let everyone know if you are looking for the first session of SKOrum, Orum's virtual SKO, you are in the right place. My name is Adam Sokol. I'm a content marketing lead here. You will not be hearing from me for very, very long. Just want to do some quick housekeeping. We will have the chat on and Q&A. So if you guys have questions, if you have comments, anything you want to throw in there, please feel free. You are more than welcome to do that. I am, as we speak, turning on the chat for our attendees as well. So we'd love to hear where you're all from and your role as we roll through. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will be in there the entire time. And now I'm going to turn it over to the moderator for our first panel, Will Aitken, who I will let himself introduce himself, and then the Orumites on here. So Will, take it away. It is all you.
Thank you so much, Adam. Yep, that's right. My name is Will Aitken, moderating today's panel on self-sustainable pipeline generation. We're going to talk about why sales teams and sales reps, account executives, can move more towards self-sustainability. I'm calling in from New York, a nice cafe here. There might be some background music. Would love to hear everyone, like Adam said, drop in the chat where you're dialing in from. It's always good to know who we got in the room. Be proud and loud. Any Canadians, big shout out. Any Brits, big shout out. Anyone, any big shout out. I'm also being joined by some absolute superstars from the team at Orum. I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. First up, we got Sarah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Bookhammer. I'm based out of Southern California. I'm a current AE here at Orum Enterprise, but previously I was an SDR and SDR manager. Really excited for the session today.
And I'm excited to talk to you more about that. Aaron, over to you.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. Thanks for putting this together. I'm in Colorado. I'm also an AE here at Orum, longtime sales and sales development leader as well, and really looking forward to today's session.
And last but not least, Ali.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name's Ali Brotherton. I have a very similar background to Sarah and Aaron. I started my sales career actually cold calling at ADP and knocking doors. And then fast forward, came into the SaaS space, was an SDR leader, and then AE at Orum, and now an AE manager at Orum here. But yes, very excited for the conversation today. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah. That's where I'm based.
You're in Denver right now because the entire Orum team is.
But I'm in Denver right now. Exactly.
I feel like we're all there with you as well. That's awesome. It's great to hear that we've got a couple of folks who are now AEs, AE managers who came from the SDR, and I think that's going to come through in a lot of the topics we talk about. First of all, though, we've got to talk about why is this topic of sustainability, being able to control your own pipeline, own it, so important. And Ali, I'm going to throw it straight back to you because I know you got some heat on this topic. That's your own words, heat, some fire.
Yes, some heat, some fire. I'm a big believer that AEs, SDRs, really anybody who touches revenue should be, responsible for self-sourcing their own pipeline. As an AE, I am a big believer in this as well. Like my mentality when I was selling was always, self-source to feed myself. And if I can get to 100% of my number on deals that I'm finding and sourcing myself, and then anything that's extra, like from the BDRs, from marketing, from referrals, throw me a bone, those ones are just extra cherries on top to help get you to accelerators. So I've been fortunate enough to work for Orum. And so when I first started here, we actually were all self-generated. We had a couple SDRs, but it was a pretty lean, mean team. So most of the pipeline in my first year here was self-sourced. And I think having that mentality and just kind of having to hunt and coming from an SDR background, if you can just never let that, tenacity leave you, you'll be in a really good space to blow out your number, promotions, whatever your dreams are as well.
Beautifully said. And I will say that, that mindset of making sure that you're always self-sustainable, so you're not relying on anyone else, it protects you against anything going wrong as well, right? And on your note about your career growth, it's just one extra skill that you get to keep on your resume. If anything were to ever change, just one more thing you can do. You may have inbound at your current company that's like 90% of your deals. As you said, some companies, they are entirely 100% self-sourced. So creating that is really important. Aaron, what are your thoughts on this particular topic?
I think a big part of it is just the urgency that folks should create for themselves. I think a good salesperson has too many ideas and not enough time. A good salesperson can't resist prospecting. And a big part of that's account selection, which we'll talk about later. But just creating urgency for yourself, remembering that today, these are the good old days. If you're an AE right now and you get promoted a couple years from now, future reps are going to say, ah, gosh, if I started in 2023, I'd be a manager too. They're going to say, oh, back in 2023, 2024, they had a wide open TAM. And, these are the good old days. You got to make hay while you can. And I think that mindset goes a long way here.
Absolutely. Sorry, there's some background noise, so I took myself on mute and then I put myself off just to make sure everyone doesn't get too much of this background music going on here. I think that's such a good point. I think it's Andy Bernard from the office who said, I wish there was a way to know you were in the good old days. All the good old days are actually over. So love to hear that coming through. While promoting this session, a lot of folks were saying, hey, like when I started in sales, there was no such thing as inbound. There was no such thing as an SDR. By treating your pipeline like your own business, that's the total ownership and accountability that you really want. Like you said, it's an extra bonus to get everything else. Or we move on to more like tactical setting goals, going out there, make sure we're targeting the right people, like you said, Aaron. Sarah, what are your thoughts on self-sustainability as a sales rep, but also as a sales team as well? I mean, I don't want to give marketing too much kudos, but sometimes that stuff dries up for one reason or another, and sales has to kind of be its own island.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is making sure you find time to dedicate to prospecting and to doing this net new pipeline generation. I struggle it myself. Like when I was an SDR, I know when I saw SDRs I manage, it's just like having that fixed time. It's like, hey, are you going to spend it doing these things you want to do versus doing things maybe you don't necessarily want to do at the time? But I think that's what really sets people apart for sustainable sales is I'm going to do this now, bring in some net new people to benefit my week, my month, my quarter. So if you create those habits, I think that's extremely beneficial on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. I'm getting some comments about the background noise here, and I do apologize. What I'll do is I'll try and move in a moment, but I'm going to do that when someone else is talking, so it's not so disruptive. Aaron, it's great to say we should set to be sustainable, but I think the first step to doing anything meaningful and being productive doing that is setting the right goals. How do you think about how much you should be prospecting and self-generating when you're working as a seller?
Great question. I think this is relevant for individual contributors as well as if there are leaders on the call here. It's much more powerful to get your reps to set their own goals versus giving them a goal that they sometimes feel like someone just chose out of thin air, right? So it starts with choosing your goal. Maybe it's hitting quota, but hopefully it's beyond that, right? And then just doing the backwards math to come up with your own personalized daily KPIs. So how many deals do I need? What's my deal size? What's my close rate? How many calls does it take to get those opportunities? And just backtracking from the end goal to what I need to do every single day. And that helps you never wonder if you're doing enough. You know exactly how much you need to do. We can go into a whole lot more detail there, but I think that is probably pretty straightforward for everybody. But I would just reiterate, it's so much more powerful for reps to do this exercise and come up with their own numbers versus having it forced upon them.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Sorry, Ali, can you hear me a little bit better now? Is there less background noise?
yes.
All right, we're in the streets of New York, everyone. Spreading the sales love. NYC, the Big Apple. Ali, I'm sorry for interrupting you. Good to hear I'm more audible now.
Yes, much better. Yeah, I was just gonna double down on what Aaron said. I wholeheartedly agree. I had the pleasure and opportunity of working for a SDR leader back in the day, and she was very big on what we call path to quota. And this has always stuck with me. So at the beginning of a quarter or beginning of a month, however you're measured, we would sit down and go through our path to quota. And basically it'd be an exercise where we pull up an Excel sheet and just walk backwards. Like let's say you're a SDR, if your number is, 15 meetings a month or something like that, using your actual conversion metrics are going to give you a lot more clarity into what you need to actually generate. And then also highlighting where the areas of focus can be from a skills perspective. So let's say that, you're doing your path to quota, you're a SDR, you want to hit 15 meetings. maybe your connection rate is lower than some of your peers, or maybe your connection rate's really high, but your conversation to meeting conversion is lower. Like that can highlight where you want to focus in terms of your skills and practice and coaching. But if nothing changed, you'll have a benchmark. And I always like to give a little cushion so you can get above, but you'll have a benchmark of how many dials, how many meetings, all that, how many prospects, all of that good stuff you need to have in your funnel, so that the anxiety that can sometimes come with selling, where you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to hit, I don't know. That goes away when you have a plan. As an AE, same thing. I did this personally when I was selling, and then I sit down with my reps and do this as well. And same thing, using their own metrics, their own conversion pieces, that creates that skill plan. And then also that pipeline, gap. And if we know, we need, I don't know, 10 opportunities or something to close, hit whatever your number is, there's levers we can pull. Maybe I go up in deal size with who I'm targeting and like do a better job of sourcing those accounts. Or maybe I, if nothing changes, like I need to self-source 3 to 5 meetings a week is typically what we aim for at Orum. And if my conversion metrics go up, then great, I'm closing more deals and I'm going to beat my number. So that always helped me as a seller, give me more confidence too, in like my path to quota, and taking out some of the anxiety of like, oh no, if this deal pushes, what am I going to do? Like having a backup plan.
It's an abundance mindset. When you have those extra padded deals in there, you sell less from a place of desperation and commission prep because you need the deal closed. And you get to actually just choose which deals you get to spend your time with. To your point, Ali, about doing the math, if you are an AE or even as a whole sales team, smart goal setting comes in the fact that, okay, we know we need to close 5 deals a month to hit our target, let's say as a rep. To close 5 deals, we generally need to send 6 contracts because one of them doesn't get done. To send 6 contracts, we know we need to send 10 proposals. That's a conversion metric. And then send 10 proposals, we need to do 20 demos, that's 30 intro calls. And to book 30 intro calls, we know we need to be booking 1 meeting a day throughout the whole month. And to book 1 meeting a day, you may now be able to see, okay, I need to send this many emails and or make this many calls and or this many DMs. That's how you set your goals. And then suddenly you realize, oh, it's not actually that bad. I only need to send 10 emails a day or make 40, 50 calls a day, and I'm going to hit my goal all by myself, right? And then all that extra bonus stuff, the stuff from marketing is exactly where it comes in. But especially as an AE, your entire job isn't prospecting, right? So if you're going to dedicate a small part of your day, how do you figure out how much of your day you should be actually spent looking out there for the new pipeline? I'm going to throw this to Aaron, but I want to hear your thoughts on this in a second, Sarah, before we talk about targeting.
It's different for everyone, of course, but I think you cannot do too much. They say like winning is a great deodorant. Well, I think pipeline is a great deodorant. Pipeline solves a lot of problems. When you have enough pipeline, as you mentioned, you don't have that commission breath. You're not gripping the bat too tight. You're not blowing up your one opportunity, blowing up one champion nonstop. If you have a deal that's stalled, resist the temptation to just continue calling that person. Go call 10 companies like them and share the problems that they shared and how you're going to help, right? If you don't have enough pipeline, it's really tough to stay firm on price. You end up becoming desperate. Your average deal size falls because you're discounting, because you're trying to drag stuff in. And the whole sales process gets a little shoddy. Your champions don't appreciate it, right? When you have enough pipeline, you're just helping people buy. You only have time to work with people who are trying to buy. And that's where you want to be. So in terms of how much, time you should spend every day, I would say start with the backwards math like we discussed a little bit. And then again, when you want to just go blow up your open pipeline for the 5th time this week, resist that temptation and double down on prospecting instead.
Beautiful. Love that. The most common question I get, Will, is, hey, this happened a lot in December. I've got 3 deals. I need them all to close. What do I do? I'm like, I hate to tell you this because you could think I'm a jerk for saying this. But what you needed to do was a month ago, 2 months ago, how long your sales cycle is. Because if you need 3 deals to get closed, you wouldn't need that if you had 6 deals. Sarah, before we move on to the next topic, any extra flavor about how you think about like allocating time and how much of your day really as an AE could be spent generating new pipeline?
Yeah, definitely building off what Aaron mentioned, just finding the time to just block off time and do it. But as an AE, if you have a lot of like later stage deals, like that takes up a lot of your time. And so it kind of like some weeks, like maybe I don't have a lot of time. And then the next week is like, hey, I need to, instead of taking a break, I need to hit the gas and continue to like maybe do more than what I did if like I kind of maintained, because sometimes that's not as easy. Whereas like in an SDR role, it's like, okay, this is how I structure my day. Like I don't have as many meetings as maybe what an AE has, since the roles are a little bit different. But I think just realizing that, because if I take the time on my lower activity week, this is going to benefit me in the future. So just realizing like, yeah, things come up. Like the most important deal, like things for an AE is closing deals. So that is a priority in the moment. But right after that, you need to source new pipeline.
That's fabulous. So of course it's contextual. Of course it's going to be tied up, but either compensating for that or recognizing when that might be coming and planning ahead of time to make sure you don't end up in that situation with 3 deals that you need to close essentially on December 30th. All right. So we spoke a little bit about doing the math, figuring out how much time and activities you have to do to actually book the meetings. But of course, the conversion numbers on those only go up when you get better at targeting and messaging. Aaron, I want to talk about like where AEs could be looking out for really low-hanging fruit, so that if they are only spending an hour a day prospecting, the hours spent with them, trying to talk to the right people.
I think account selection is so important. You might even think that I'll overstate it. I tend to think it's the most important thing. You can have someone with really great messaging and that does everything right and they're putting in the work, but they look at their account list and it just feels like 100 cold accounts. What I'm going to describe here works whether you have to stick to an account list, your named accounts, 50 to 100, or if you have a wide open TAM. But really it comes down to narrowing your focus and batching your accounts thematically. So some obvious ideas are industry and geography, but also private equity firms, right? The best salesperson at your company, when a new case study comes out, they're looking at like their gears are automatically working. They have a fire within them immediately thinking, who would find this case study most relevant? And it feels like a perishable good, like the clock is ticking. They have urgency to go get that case study in the right hands. In previous roles, I was a top rep at Agility Recovery and a top manager there, and account selection was a big part of it. We had folks that were hitting up hospitals and schools and public sector and insurance agencies. And I would say, you're calling New Mexico credit unions and you're calling Missouri banks, right? And just there's 3 desired outcomes that you're hoping for here. One is to have relevant name drops and case studies. The second is to speak their language. But the third, and I think almost the most important, is you're trying to trick your own mind into being excited about your accounts. And again, if you have a wide open TAM, every new customer that comes out, every case study that comes out, you should feel urgency to go attack more companies like them. But again, if you have to stick to your named account list, you have a little bit less flexibility there, but try to batch them thematically in one way or another. And I think PE firms are a sneaky one. Go look at who funds this account. Go look at that private equity firm's portfolio. And if you can reach out to new prospects saying, hey, we work with other XYZ portcos like you, and here's why, they listen. You have instant credibility and you're in the door.
Absolutely. I freaking love that. And it's almost very similar to lookalike accounts. But any company that's part of a private equity firm, they generally know and have probably brushed arms with some of the other folks in that portfolio as well. Great place to look. Ali, what are some tools and places that you tend to look for those lower hanging fruits in your prospect lists?
Yeah, for sure. I also do want to kind of double down on what you shared earlier, Will, of a common question that you get of like, hey, it's under quarter, I have to close these 3 deals, otherwise I'm not going to hit. Like, what do I do? Yes, like don't put yourself in that position. And to what Sarah said, I do think it's very important to kind of time batch. Like you're going to have weeks where you're so busy. And like, that's awesome because that means you're progressing deals forward and going to close them. But then you're going to have weeks where you're more open. And so doubling down in those weeks will help you get into a position where you're not, frantic at the end of quarter. But sometimes that happens. And so I did want to just share a tip and trick too on places you can go to try and find some of that low hanging fruit at the end of quarter for us. And ideally we do this earlier, but reaching out to current customers. Hey, if there's new features, if there's upsell opportunities, those are great opportunities to just share. How have things been going with the CSM? Like great to, reconnect with you, see if there's a chance to upsell more seats. I think other opportunities as well, and this goes for any time throughout your quarter or your month, close lost opportunities, following back up. And if you have a great CRM or a great RevOps team that gives you, boxes to check of why they closed lost, was it timing, was it feature, something along those lines, can pull a really targeted list to follow up and see if you can convert some things quickly. Churned customers is another one. Like for whatever reason why they churn, making sure that you're doing really tailored strategic outreach on all of these low-hanging fruit pieces. But never give up, right? But keep fighting the fight, even if it's towards the end, because if you do book something, maybe it can convert quickly for the quarter, or maybe that's good pipeline for next quarter. So I'm a big believer in like the low-hanging fruit pieces I just mentioned, closed lost, churned, accounts that, you can upsell into as well. And then I think what Aaron shared is I'm 100% aligned there, of like case studies. Look at your biggest customers, look at your biggest clients, look at your clients that have the most time with your company and what companies are similar to those and why did they buy, and then put that into your messaging and do that research ahead of time. And you can use like a solution like Orum to have that conversation. But I'm a big believer in that. Companies that have raised funding, I know that's a very common one. Usually looking for prospects who have started, in their role maybe about 6 months. Typically they're hired with some type of initiative, or they are really wanting to prove themselves. So if they have enough time, usually 6 months to a year, that can be a good resource as well, doing some LinkedIn searches that way. There's lots of different options and different ways. I mean, we've done prospecting from LinkedIn posts. Sometimes like Reddit is one that we're seeing pop up more and more. Depends on your industry, depends on your space. But then also picking the brains of your top sellers, your top SDRs, and understanding where are they finding and sourcing accounts too.
That's really, really good stuff, and tons of actionable tips and some places people might not be thinking about to get those low-hanging fruits. Because if you do find yourself at the end of the quarter, month, whatever, with lower pipe than you'd like, those past closed deals that maybe churned, or those folks who looked at your product but didn't buy from you and bought from a competitor or decided not to move forward at that point in time, they're already kind of a bit further along than just a straight up cold leads. They might even be the type of lead that closes quicker. And to your point, I'm typically using something like LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Anytime I close a deal account or a new case study comes out, to your point, I'm going to look for lookalike accounts. I'm going to look for 5 companies like them and say, hey, we just started working with this company to solve this problem. I don't suppose you're seeing anything similar. And you can hit them up, and because you've got that company name in there, it's going to be a much more relevant messaging than just straight up cold emailing them saying, hey, does any of these rings resonate? You want to check this out? LinkedIn Sales Navigator is one of my favorite tools for doing all that, because it's just most folks are on that.
Yep. And I think actually 2 that just came to mind as well, referrals. You spend a lot of time, especially AEs, building these champions, and ask. Like a lot of times we don't ask for referrals, but if they're happy, if they're loving it, and the easier you can make it on them to get that referral is helpful. So I'm just seeing in the chat, like explain how you go about that. One tactic could be looking at who your champion is connected to on LinkedIn, seeing if those are accounts that you own, and then to write an email or give them a call and ask exactly like, hey, I saw you're connected to Will. Is that just a LinkedIn connection, or are you guys actually, is that actual relationship here? I know, like, feel free to stiff arm me. Like if the answer is no, I respect that 100%. But like salesperson to salesperson, would you be open to giving me an intro, or do you think Will could benefit from this? And so if you can ask like specifically for, specific people, it's a higher likelihood that they'll give you an introduction versus like, hey, who else do you think could benefit from this? Helping take some of that heavy lifting off of their plate. And then same thing with old champions, keeping in touch with your champions. If they move to new companies, those are great deals to move quickly. And usually, they've worked with you in the past, and you have a relationship there already as well.
You just hit on something so good, Ali, and this is something that grows in value over time. But as an account executive, you're constantly working with all these different buying teams, right? Constantly working with maybe up to 20 different teams a month. Every person you speak to, create like a modern day Rolodex. So even if they don't buy from you, or they do buy from you, whatever happens, create a list in Sales Navigator, or create a list in your CRM of people you've worked with in the past. And then every week, month, check to see if any of those people have moved companies. And because they've got familiarity with you, just hit them and say, hey, have you got anything similar in place yet at this company? And they're going to be much more likely to respond. And that way you get the most out of being an account executive, the the value that you get from talking to people, you can keep hold on to that. We'll talk a little bit more about referrals in a minute. Sarah, anything that you think about low-hanging fruit people should be looking at for deals that are more likely to convert at a higher rate than just a straight up cold lead?
Yeah. So talking to like I have a limited account list, like selling into the enterprise. So sometimes it's not always the right time to be talking to that account. And so I think keeping them warm or having a really good follow-up cadence when the time is better. Because like we're going into the new year right now. A lot of companies are like, hey, I have budget now, whereas like we didn't have anything last year. So I think just being really smart about like keeping track of your accounts. Say who's a big fan of Orum, who wants to follow up. Can I talk to other teams to help build momentum when the time is right? But I love what Ellie mentioned about past champions and people that are interested. Like, for example, I speak to a lot of people and they're interested in Orum, but a lot of people like are shifting around jobs. Like maybe they're not a decision maker at another company, but they can give me some ammo about who is. And I think not only going from the top down, but bottom up, like, hey, I'm new, but I know these are the people that you should talk to. Like, this is what's going on. And that's going to help me stand out even more when I'm trying to talk to the right people. So I think that's some good low hanging fruit always love to tap into, along with tracking like when is the right time to re-engage with this account.
That's a truly amazing point there, Sarah. You can do this over LinkedIn as well. It's super easy, right? Or you can even call someone. Because those people lower down the account don't get helped out by salespeople quite as often. They can give you the amazing information. So for in your example, let's say, you could talk to an SDR and say, hey, how are your team currently making your dials? They might be like, oh, I'm doing it in here, I'm doing it there. That then gives you the information to then go to them and come and say, hey, the way they're doing this, a lot of people are finding this problem. And that's going to be a much more relevant cold message to that decision maker than someone who hadn't done the bottom-up approach and got the information before reaching out. I want to talk a little bit more about the actual channels that you use and how you can tactically go about that, cold calling, cold email, and Ali, you mentioned already referrals. I'm going to start with you, Aaron, again. What's your process on when and how you ask someone for a referral?
I need to do a better job of it, to be honest.
Everyone says that. No one has ever gone, no, I don't know. I ask all the time, you know, but yeah.
So this is rather obvious, but do it when they're happiest, right? Not just happiest with you or your product, but also like when they don't have a ton of stressful stuff going on. To use a Josh Braun quote, you can't ask for a withdrawal before you made some deposits as well, right? So always doing anything I can to help people, proactively offering help. That goes a long way, to when you do ask for a referral. So I would do it at every step of the process, right? Like I don't think there's any wrong time to do it, but try to do it at a sensible time when they're in a good mood, when they have some bandwidth, and after they owe you one.
Any flavor to add to that? I know everyone is always like, oh, I don't ask enough. I find having a process to know like a trigger almost of when to ask. And my favorite place time to ask anyone for anything is when they say thank you, to your point, Aaron, what Josh says about deposits, you withdraw when you've given them something. Thank you is like an immediate, oh, I've done something nice to this person. Maybe it's an opportunity to use that gratitude they have to ask for something in return. And that's a great place to ask for a referral. Even if someone hasn't bought from you, they're just saying thank you, you've done something good for them. Like, hey, no worries. I don't suppose you know anyone else who's a bit like yourself. You might benefit just from a conversation with myself, not buy our product, just a conversation, right? If you've built that rapport, if you've built that aminosity, they're much more like to say, yeah, actually, I do know someone from my past company, or I have a peer, or I met someone at an event who's talking about justice. You got to ask to get. So anytime you hear the words, thank you, use a talk track like that.
I'll mention
Ali,
that people will believe
sorry.
anything if it's a compliment as well, right? So it's like, hey, you're a well-known person in the space, you know everyone, and people look to you as a resource and as a thought leader. So let me ask you. And they're much more willing to help after some good old-fashioned flattery.
Them up. I love that. Let's talk more about cold calling, all right, which is, in my opinion, Orum's forte, given the nature of your work. The biggest thing I hear from AEs is cold calling is both time consuming. I think we're talking about different ways you can target the right prospects, so it doesn't have to be so time consuming. Ali, what are your tips generally to an AE who's maybe Because let's be real, cold calling can be scary. And then when you don't do a lot, it can get even scarier and you're out of practice. What would be your tips for someone to get back on the phone if that's a channel they want to use?
Yeah, I think we're all lying if we don't say we have some type of phone anxiety at some point in time in our careers. So it can be very real. I think the biggest advice I have is just, swallow the frog. Like, do the thing that you like doing the least, the first. So, and once you start doing it and once you get, more and more comfortable, then, maybe that becomes the thing you like the best. So for me, I actually love cold calling. Email writing is what I do not like to do. So I try and knock that out in the beginning of the day, and then cold calling, as I have time in between. I think from an AE perspective, if you're, struggling to find time to call, there's solutions like, a plug, but like Orum, where you can have, just a 30-minute block and get into multiple great conversations without losing that quality side as well, and making sure you do that research piece too. So solutions like that can certainly help. I think, if you're using a click to call solution, or if you were like me when I was at ADP, punching in manually on your phone, I think just block the time. Like, just be dedicated. And, there's no, I don't have a magic wand or like magic sauce to make it easier, but I think just being dedicated and following back up with yourself of what your goals are. That always has helped me of like, okay, I really want to hit 100%, or I really want to hit 150, or I really want to get that promotion, or I really want to buy that, whatever. Your motivation is connecting it back to that. And I'm a big fan of like sticky notes. So I'll sometimes put like a sticky note on my computer to just remind me like, oh, that's right. That's why I'm doing this thing that I don't really like to do, like cold calling or whatever it is. And then just block the time, and as much as you possibly can, try and stick to it. Or as Sarah mentioned, which is so real as a full cycle seller, there's going to be times where you have to move it, but don't neglect it. If you have to move it, make sure you're making up for that time, because you might have weeks that are slammed, and then you might have weeks where you're like, ooh, I don't really have a lot going on. Those are the times to like really seize the moment and double down and do more than, than you need to do as well.
That's absolutely awesome. And I can confirm, as a non-Orum employee, I think Orum is the only reason I could make cold calls as an account executive, because you can make $120 an hour rather than $20. And I've been in that yellow pages tapping in the numbers as well. It's a night and day difference. Beyond that, if you're going to leave voicemails, that's like 20 seconds for every call. I recommend trying to find a way that you can pre-record those and leave those. Is a big time saver. That way, it's just, out of every person who doesn't pick up, which is most people, let's be real, you're getting them a voicemail, right? And that way you're building awareness in that account for whatever sequence or follow-up stages you have. Sarah, what do you, let's talk about time blocking, because we mentioned that there, and I think that's one of the biggest things you can do. Putting a tough thing in your calendar to make sure you've got enough time to deliver on that activity, and sticking to that, treating it like a hard meet. Like, it's as important as me joining this webinar today, right? Maybe not quite that important, but it's up there, I'm going to treat that like something that cannot be moved, and rescheduling it would be bad. What do you do in terms of time blocking, and how do you go about that proactively?
Yeah, I mean, between meetings, like let's say if I have an hour block, like I definitely make sure that I make the most of that time. So building off of like that last question of like, how do I get into calling? And like that's pretty much how I spend my time when I'm doing pipeline generation. Like I build my list, like, yeah, I can send emails, but I love talking to people. That's the quickest way just to book a meeting for me and just qualify in or out. But a little tip is setting yourself up for success in this hour block. Are you going to call this big list and it's a bunch of different names? You don't know what's in there and you feel really anxious calling that. Like, who's going to pick up? Is it like this VP? Is it this random person? Is it a wrong number? So slice and dice your list ahead of time to make you feel like, okay, these next 30 people, I know that they're this certain persona, or I know that these next 50 people are accounts that I've talked to before or had a demo, or okay, got through those, like built up some confidence, had a few conversations. Now I'm going to tackle this ice cold list that I've never talked to these folks before. And then that, like within my block, I have a bunch of mini lists versus going into it. And I feel like I want to be set up for success myself. Like I just don't want to call some list blind. So that's how I personally love to make my calls, or like demo follow-up, progressing deals, close lost, calling other champions, and net new. So that's how I set the most meetings, when I have the time to have that 1 hour time block.
Very, very nicely said. And in general, yeah, time block, make sure you're doing everything you set a goal for that time block as well. Whether that's number of dials, number of prospects added to your sequence, number of emails you're sending. I've heard both Ali and Sarah say that you're more phone than email, but I would like to try and touch on that. And Aaron, if you don't feel comfortable talking to us too, I can always give some extra flavor there. But is there anything you think about when it comes to email that rep should be thinking about to save time, do this efficiently in a way that's not going to eat up their entire day, but also is not going to annoy their prospects and get them unsubscribed, report spam, and just get ignored?
Yeah, well, I would defer to you as the email expert, but a couple of things that I'm really big on is sell the pain, not a promise, right? Like, how do you sell milk? Well, there's been two really popular campaigns in the 80s and 90s. It was Milk Does a Body Good, where it takes a scrawny preteen and he turns into an American Gladiator, right? And it was goofy. It wasn't meant to be serious, but they're selling that vision, that promise. The much more successful campaign was Got Milk, where they're selling the problem, and even a really specific, strange, obscure problem. The problem behind the problem even, right? It's not just, hey, you want some milk with your sandwich. It's, what if you're about to win $1,000 on this radio contest, but you can't answer because you don't have any milk, right? And so I like to challenge folks, if they say, what does your company do? Give me 3 bullets. They're often going to use a lot of nouns and adjectives about the product. I would push them towards verbs and adverbs about the prospect. The prospect is the hero, right? And so you want it to be about the prospect, not your product. And then ideally you want it to be about the pain points, not a bunch of promises, because every email they get says, hey, we can help you be better and faster, and we're cheaper. And they start to just not even see those. They don't even register those because it just washes over them because they're so desensitized to it. But when you can correctly hypothesize their pain, you have instant credibility and they're listening.
Absolutely gorgeous, and applies to the whole prospecting spectrum. If you're pitching, in my opinion, you're losing a lot of the time, especially if you haven't already identified there might be something they're not doing as well as they could be. It's just going to fall on deaf ears. So to give a tactical example for emails, I always like to leave something about them. And by the way, some people might hate this. I don't believe every email has to be a personalized email. I'm not sure, especially in the context of this conversation in the account executive, that is very time consuming. What I would recommend is referring to what we were talking about earlier, the targeting, making sure you're going after the right prospects. And if you're doing that, you're going to have a reason for reaching out to them anyway, because you can say, hey, we just started working with this company, or you can reach out to them with a really good trigger that suggests they're buying and not have to personalize it, but still make sure it's actually going to be relevant. So a framework I like to use for that is what I call OPSA, which is observation, problem, solution, ask. I start something about them. Hey, it looks like you're in the same space as this company, for example, or it looks like you've had some headcount reduction in your sales team recently, or hey, it looks like you're launching a new product this month. Then I can go into a problem. So it's the key of the OPSA. That might be leading to this issue. If you've had some turnover on your sales team, that might mean that overall activity is down. If you're launching a new product, that could mean you're struggling to come up with branding campaigns to get people adopting that new product. And then I go to the solution. Hey, we've helped other company. If I have a relevant case study, it has to be relevant. I'll use that. If I don't, then I can just say we typically help companies solve the issue by doing this, and then an ask. Does that sound interesting to you? Does it sound like it's worth a chat? Are you against hearing more? Do you want me to send over more information? And that generally is nice and easy to respond to. And you could do all that automated, not have to invest any time other than making sure that you're identifying the right prospects for the right reasons. You could send that email to 10 different prospects, all of which have had sales team turnover recently, right? And that way you're not adding up the time because, as we said, sustainable is difficult when you're working a bunch of deals at the same time as well. That was a lot, sorry. Before we get on to, I'd love to hear some questions. I know we've had a few along the way, but I haven't been able to do them because I'm on a mobile phone in the streets of the city here. But for other channels, making use of LinkedIn, the non-traditional ones, I'd say, like not just email and phone. Do you have any tactical tips on how to make the most of those without basically spending a whole day doing it? Sarah, I'm going to ask that to you.
Yeah, LinkedIn is extremely powerful. Like maybe not as much as like a robust email, but I kind of just do it for like these quick chats, like thank you, like after I like have a good conversation with somebody or they respond and just sending them a connect. I personally like to connect with people as soon as like I have a good conversation with them or I'm trying to do outreach. And most of the time, yeah, we can just spark up something more casual there. It's harder to scale because it is still manual and like typing things out. So yeah, I love to use LinkedIn when I can, as well as emails. Like I love to customize as well as send some of those automated, like within a sequence. So I think that's very important of still having like keeping up with sequences. I think that's what's tough. It's like, oh, I built something 6 months ago, but like I want to change up my messaging. So I think that goes into the prospecting, like finding time to always update that information. But I love to do that if possible. Sometimes, like when I'm progressing a deal, I'm on a texting and actually like mobile phone interaction with my champion where I can send them a quick call, like call them quickly or send them a quick text. I think that really proves that like there's trust within that relationship. So I love to do that when I can.
Ali, Sarah's question just gave me so what you just said, Sarah, awesome. And I like the fact that you're talking about like in the sequence as well. But you said about keeping your sequences, and for anyone who doesn't know, obviously sequence set of steps that you can typically do in a sales engagement platform, some automated, some manual, make sure there's no bottlenecks. How do you figure out how many people you need to be adding to a sequence to make sure that getting the results there?
Yes, back to math of sales. So for me, we do an exercise, and actually we do this a lot in our pilots at Orum as well. Because let's say you want to increase the amount of meetings that you're booking, right? You have to have enough people or enough accounts or enough touches. So usually there's 3 levers you can pull. Yeah, like how many accounts can I boost the amount of accounts I'm reaching out to? Can I boost the amount of prospects I'm reaching out to in accounts, which depending on your segment, like if you're selling into big enterprise, the answer is yes. Maybe you have some smaller or a fewer set of accounts, but you can go very deep. And then the third lever you can pull is the touches to those prospects. I think actually, Will, you and I were talking about this on a different conversation, but it takes more touches now when you're outbounding than it ever has to get a conversation started. And so going deeper into those prospects, and I'm a big believer in omni-channel. I do prefer the phone, just I like having conversations, but there is value on all channels because we don't know how prospects like to respond or how they like to work with us. So adding more touches is another lever you can pull. But in terms of sort of best practices, it really depends on your segment of like what your TAM is and how deep you can go into your accounts, and then what your goal is. So typically what I like to do is we have a Orum goal calculator. And for the phones, let's say I want to book 10 meetings over the phone, in a month. What I'll do is then calculate out, okay, well, what's my conversion to get those meetings? How many dials does it take? How many conversations does it take? How many meetings have I booked historically? And that will give me how many dials I need to make to hit my, 10 meetings over the phone. Then I can take those 10 meetings over the phone and look at how many tasks do I need based on my conversion and how many accounts or prospects do I need to fill that funnel up. So if anyone's curious, you can message me on LinkedIn, but we have a calculator to kind of go through that math to give a really specific number based on your TAM, how many prospects are available, how many accounts are available, so that you can be really targeted and make sure you have enough in the funnel to hit whatever metric you're looking for.
So good. And to your point again, knowing your math, you can say, okay, I know my conversions. That means I need 20 new people to call every day. But there's the option to either increase the number of people going in or increase the conversion rates. And that's where you get into that self-coaching space, right? Okay, if I'm calling 50 people and I'm having 5 conversations and I'm booking 2 meetings, can I improve the number of people having conversations with me by a different opener or a different reason for my call? Or can I try and get more of those 5, let's say 3 instead of 2, booking a meeting with me? That again, knowing your math is so vital to know where you can improve and where you can drive more results in the future. We got a poll that's popped up. We'd like an Orum demo. The answer is yes, by the way, for anyone wondering what the answer to that quiz question was there. But I would also love to hear any questions in the comments. And while we're doing that, let's get a little bit tactical on the cold call. I want to hear the 3 of you. When Adam said, hey, Will, I'm going to put you on a webinar with 3 Orum reps, and they're superstars. let's get a little bit tactical on cold calling. Ali, what's your cold call opener?
Yeah, cold call for me. Hey, Will, Ali with Orum. How are ya? Good.
I'm
What
good. You sound happy today, Ali. What do you want?
Yes, yeah, Will. The reason I'm reaching out specifically to you, I was taking a look at your LinkedIn and noticed X, Y, and Z. I was actually, specifically working with other sales leaders, and don't want to assume anything here, Will, but most of the time they're focused on increasing overall pipeline and getting more at bats and coaching for their team. Are those topics that are top of mind for you at all, or am I, missing the mark here?
So good, Ali. You came with that with the energy. I was like, you're going to do a cold call open, and you literally was like, cold call voice, let's go. Ready for that. That's awesome. So I
Yes,
love that.
smile
Hey,
and
hey,
dial.
okay, Aaron, quick speed round. I'm going to throw it to you next on the spot. You weren't expecting this. Sorry. Not sorry.
Oh, Ali did so many things that I'm such a big believer in there. I often say the best two cold calling tips are stand up and smile. I think tonality is everything. And I've had reps and teammates, friends who they would always adjust their messaging, but it never worked because it always sounded like they were calling to give someone bad news. You should sound like you're calling to let them in on a secret. You're giving them something that's going to help them, right? So just being confident in that. Another amazing thing Ali did was a priority drop. I'm a big believer in the challenger sale, but instead of pushing towards like two pain points and putting the prospect on the spot and asking them to be vulnerable and admit something that they're doing wrong, they're much more open to telling you which of the priorities they have on their mind, right? And so Ali was able to toss out a couple of different things like, hey, maybe it's coaching and pipeline, or maybe it's churn and whatever, right? It depends on what you're selling. But by offering up two different priority drops, it gives them, it kind of puts them in a spot where they have to answer, but also they're more comfortable answering because you're not calling them out or acting like you know more than them.
Love that, Aaron. And at the start of your cold calls, do you say something similar on the first line?
Yeah, so I often say, hey, thanks for the time and know how busy you are. I don't ask, is it a good time? I don't apologize. I thank them. And then I get right into it. There's actually a lot of data that shows that the sentence or the phrase, the reason for my call is, has great productivity returns. Like it works really well. The conversion rates go up when using that term. And then another important word is because. Because is so powerful. There's, psychological, sociological studies that show how much more effective it is. Like you can ask, hey, can I cut in line? And you can say, can I cut in line? Because I don't want to wait. And even though that's not a great reason, just by saying because, so many more people would let you cut in line. There's a lot of different examples of that, but I'm big on letting them know the reason for my call. And then, as you already can guess, I'm trying to dive into the pain points, not just telling them better, faster, cheaper.
Absolutely freaking love that. And that story about the printer, I think it's in Jeb Blunt's Fanatical Prospects in that story, either that or Keenan's Gap Selling. But yeah, give them a because and they're more likely to let you cut in the line. Same thing applies to a cold call when you say I'm calling because they're just more likely to hear you out. Sarah, do you want to give us your opener?
Hey, Will, this is Sarah over at Orum. Good to connect. How you doing this Wednesday?
I am good, Sarah. Just in New York, a bit busy. What's up?
Awesome. I know I'm catching you cold here. I just wanted a quick second just to introduce what I do. Do you have a quick moment?
I
And
do
can
have a moment.
XYZ.
I've got 3 minutes for my next meeting. That's awesome. That's great.
Awesome. Yeah, I just keep it really light, friendly tone, excited tone. Because if you kind of get those first few seconds and they engage a little bit more, like you automatically can get another 10 seconds. But I think tone is very important as well.
That's beautiful. I couldn't agree more. The tonality, feeling comfortable, feeling friendly, being someone that wants to, you'd actually want to have a conversation with, right? Most of the calls I get don't have that tone, like they're reading from a script. So practice is going to make that perfect. Listen to yourself. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to judge yourself, but work on that and just think to yourself, do I sound like someone I'd want to talk with if they walked up to me in the street, gave me a call? Use that empathy so you can do better at your own job. I asked you for your opening. It would be fair if I shared mine back in front of this absolute massive crowd. But yeah, I typically go over a little bit something different. Y'all kind of went, how are you? Or went straight to the call in Aaron's. I do like it a permission-based opener. I know some people are against them. I'm just okay. Ali, I'm doing some research. I think you might be able to help me if you've got a second. And the reason I do that is just because, again, I've I know I can crank that out no matter what happens. So when I'm dialing using something like Orum and someone picks up and I wasn't ready for it, I know I can just put that out no matter what. And it buys me some time to maybe pull up some notes in my sequence, see, okay, the reason for my call is, and then I can give them a personalized reason, personalized for why I've actually decided to call them specifically that day. And that works for me. So most important thing I'd say is make sure it works for you so you can focus on that finality. Adam, as I mentioned, I'm on the phone right now, so I'm having a hard time pulling up the chat and see if there's any questions. Are there any great questions that you can push to us as we come to an end here?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of really, really wonderful stuff up there. There's been a few that, obviously we're going to jump back to a few of the other things. There was some stuff, somebody asked basically, when do you let a deal go? When, we've talked a lot about pipeline building, but people want to know from all of you, like, when do you just say, you know what, I got to move on?
To me, I spend less time worrying about that and I spend more time trying to go talk to their competitors, right? Like you can only lead a horse to the water, can't force it to drink, but the thing that I can control is reaching out to more people, right? And when it comes to that outreach for open pipeline and I'm deciding, should I even, bother them again? Well, stop bothering them. Send them something helpful. It doesn't have to be a webinar or an ebook that your company wrote. Find some curated content. A great tip is go to the title that you're selling to at your company and ask them who their hero is. Who do they look up to in their space? What publications do they read? What magazines, right? And a great way to put it is, hey, if your best friend just got this same job that you have, what's the one thing that you would give them to set them up for success? What's the one article or the one trick that you think everyone in your role should have or should know? That's the type of stuff that you should be sharing with those prospects. And when you're doing a more healthy nurture track like that, you don't worry as much about like, should I bother this person again? Give them something truly helpful and they're going to reach out to you at the right time.
That I had another one I want to get your guys' thoughts on. Somebody basically asked, like, how do you uncover when an account is ready to invest in a tech stack? We know that I think there's like something like 97% of people aren't actively purchasing. It's some insane number. So you all, as as the people who are engaging those conversations every day, how do you find out if they're ready to actually have this conversation beyond starting the conversation?
Do you want
There
to?
are awesome intent signals out there. Intent signals come to mind. Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, it's kind of like feeding off of that last question of knowing like, should I walk away from this deal or are they ready for this deal? I think the main thing is like having a strong champion and are they willing to help build a business case internally? Because like if it's the right time, they're going to help you wrangle the right parties to get involved. They're having these conversations like, hey, this is what leadership is talking about right now. And this really aligns to our business at the moment. And so I think a really key piece is, do you have access to the right people? Are you too low level where they're not going to help you get in there? Or are they introducing you, or is your champion like opening those doors for you? So that kind of, for me, answers both questions. Like, am I in the right deal? Are they going to help me? Or is it just like the wrong time? Because time is so valuable. You don't want to go down this rabbit hole of wasting your time.
Love that. Go ahead, Allie.
Oh, I just agree wholeheartedly. I think that especially if you've had a meeting with them before, like refresh yourself on those conversations and what was important to them at that time. And any like timing barriers that you discovered in that first initial discovery call. And then just have a nurture strategy. I think that's something, especially selling into enterprise accounts, they're not always going to be, or outbound, really any outbound, it's not always going to be ready. And so having a consistent process and follow-up process, whether that's, once a month, once a quarter, depends on your once a week, depends on your cycle. And then to Aaron's point earlier, making sure that those touches are valuable. So maybe it's content you're sending from your company or content from the field. So we're lucky at Orum, we sell to salespeople, we sell to sales development people. There's a lot of content that isn't Orum branded that's being produced. And so maybe I had a conversation with somebody who was struggling to ramp up their calling culture and they weren't ready for a pilot with Orum. I could go and find something on LinkedIn or something, a webinar that I'm watching, like things that I'm interested in. Usually my prospects are interested in too. And so finding those types of resources and just sharing a quick note. Hey, I know I know when we chatted, it wasn't a great time. I was just thinking about you, and dissect it too. I think like sometimes we just send resources and are like, hey, this might be a good resource for you. Even better if you can take a screenshot or type out like what you thought was actually interesting. So show that you've put that time and work in and why you thought it would be relevant. And that way, and stay in touch with them on LinkedIn, all these things. But that way, when the timing is right, you're top of mind. And it's a simple, natural conversation.
Woo! Ali, love it. Adam, how are we doing for time?
We are just at about time. There's one last comment I wanted to bring up. It wasn't really a question. I was just laughing. Somebody put in the Q&A when you were all going through your openers. They said, I've used all those openers and heard not interested and been hung up on. And so I just wanted to close from my end and just say like the entire idea around this campaign and these sessions is positivity in sales. We want to focus on that. There's no one opener that's going to get you 100% of people saying like, yeah, I want to hear more. Sometimes people are going to hang up and you just move on. So don't, everyone on the call who's listening in, don't beat yourself up if someone says they're not interested. That's part of the experience. So we are just about at time though. So I will let you wrap up.
Yeah, no, to your point, Adam, I think all of this comes down, there's no silver bullet in sales. And although sales doesn't necessarily have to be just a numbers game, obviously you do have to work with some laws of averages that not everyone's going to be a fit. Not everyone's going to want to talk to you regardless of your opener. I've used the same opener, which was like more of a funny one, wasn't what I gave. I had one person say, go die in a hole. I had one person hang up on me halfway through, and the other person was like, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I'd love to talk. And I booked a meeting with them, right? That's just something you have to accept, that sales is being told no sometimes. And that's okay as well, because it makes you feel way more sweeter when you finally get the yes and you get the result you're looking for. If it was easy, I wouldn't feel slightest bit. But thank you so much for having me, by the way, today. And apologies for the background noise. I chose a cafe, and when I got there, no one was there. Honestly, I was like, "This is perfect." I should have gone for this one because that one still is empty. That one's still banging. So go in there and give them a tip for wasting their table for an hour.
Beautiful. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you are coming to our next session, I put us a link in the Slack. If you haven't registered, we have another session at the top of the hour. I'm going to give everyone a few minute bio break, and then we will see you over there. Thank you again, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope we will see you in our next session.